You know, years ago now, we very nearly got a Man of Steel sequel from the director of the last 4 Mission Impossible movies. And according to him, it would have been, quote, so f***ing good. Well, James Gunn's Superman is finally hitting theaters, and there's already talks of sequels, spin-offs, and other cinematic crossovers to go down in this universe. As of the recording of this video, I have not seen James Gunn's Superman, although I am seeing it in IMAX on the 10th. But if this movie makes even a little bit of a profit, I think it's safe to assume that we can be looking forward to an official sequel announcement soon. Or can we? See, Superman in cinema has not always been a smooth ride, with titles like Kevin Smith and Tim Burton's Superman Lives becoming scrapped midway into production, or Abrams' unmade Superman Flyby, and even the announced and then immediately unannounced Man of Steel 2 starring Henry Cavill back as the Big Blue Boy Scout. So today, we're gonna talk all about Man of Steel 2 and the Superman sequel that we almost got. So let's talk about it. In 2008, after the release of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight broke box office records for Cape Cinema, DC Studios wanted to follow it up with a new and more realistic take on their characters, swiftly hiring Zack Snyder, who had already adapted Frank Miller's 300 and Alan Moore's Watchmen, and he was tasked to create a Superman with the potential to cross over with Christian Bale's Batman or Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Batman if things go well. And in 2013, we got the film. Produced by Nolan, written by David S. Goyer, and directed by Zack Snyder, the movie was released and immediately became a financial success, seemingly breathing new life into this catalog of characters for audiences to get excited about in the wake of Marvel's recent reign over the superhero genre. And I don't want to speak for everybody here, mainly because Man of Steel is probably the most polarizing Superman movie in existence, but I think the general opinion is that we all would have been happy for another outing with Cavill in the red cape. Zack Snyder's original Man of Steel film was the first movie we got since 2006, when Bryan Singer attempted to create his pseudo-sequel, sort of reboot, of the original Christopher Reeve quadrilogy. Man of Steel did away with any previous continuity and decided to retell the origin story of Clark Kent as Superman. He also wanted to embrace the more tortured, layered, and complicated, and yes, darker version of the character.
Krypton had its chance!
The idea was to create a more grounded version of the character that would give audiences a more relatable take. Couple that with Snyder's stylistic eye for capturing epic action, throw in some kinetic fight sequences, more muted and moody colors, angsty faces, war, redemption, revenge, and even murder. Now, I can't pretend that this didn't spark public interest in the character of Superman once again, but something was happening. People were starting to look at Superman differently after seeing this movie. Audiences that called Superman a boring OP do-gooder were now seeing him as an edgier, more conflicted hero who had to choose between his inner rage and his desire to put a stop to Zod and his reign of chaos. Zack Snyder aimed to show the world that even with the powers of a god, Superman chooses to be human. And regardless of where you stand, because yes, I can see you typing hashtag restore the Snyderverse in the comments now. Regardless of where you stand on it as a whole, I think it's safe to say that Henry Cavill was ideal casting for the character, and any of us would have loved to have seen him do it again.
I just think he's kinda hot.
So what happened? Well, simply put, the Avengers happened. See, in 2012, Marvel released what has since become one of the most iconic moments committed to film when Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and Captain America crossed over from their own respective film series into a shared cinematic universe. I admit that sounds a lot less epic now than it did in 2012, trust me. But to nobody's surprise, The Avengers was a Hulk smash hit. I think we need to cut that one out. I do. This ushered in a new era for superhero movies and unlocked the financial potential that comes with crossing over multiple recognizable characters into one single film. So, DC started to scramble. By this time, Nolan had already concluded his Batman trilogy, and Snyder alone was unprepared to fast-track his one-off Superman film into the next big comic book universe. Frustrations were running high, and the studio became a think tank for how to compete with Marvel. Veteran Hollywood talent would be hired and fired fired from projects that were messily getting half of the attention they deserved due to the sheer volume. Projects like Green Lantern, The Flash, and a direct Superman sequel were being floated around and even had high-profile talent attached to these projects, including a director that had a pitch for Man of Steel 2 named Christopher McQuarry. Remember that name because we are going to get back to him.
I don't think they're interested in sharing this world.
So, sequels and new in-universe crossovers were being ramped up and prioritized so that DC could compete with Marvel. There was simply no time to methodically build out this world the way that Snyder and Nolan had originally planted seeds for. This led to the studio focusing on characters appearing in movies other than the qualities of the movies themselves. I mean, for fuck's sake, we saw Batman in, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movies, and he still never got a solo Batman and Gotham movie. So DC immediately starts pumping these things out. BVS, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, and then, finally, the movie that was meant to compete with Marvel and their cast of iconic characters, Justice League. Oof. Now, if this was the phase 1 for the DCEU, then yikes. The attempt to keep up with the other studios and their connected universes had led to a messy introduction to their own universe. Continuity would be changed from film to film. Superman's arc became a trilogy of misfires that killed him off before we fully got to see him grow. And the Justice League was plagued with personal tragedies for Zack Snyder, which led to Joss Whedon coming in and overhauling the film to an embarrassing degree. And at this point, it looked like all of our Superman sequel hope was lost forever. So much so that even the accomplished superhero film director Matthew Vaughn, who directed Kick-Ass and X-Men First Class, was hired to write a sequel that just ended up never getting developed. And you would think that it's over, until see, while Cavill had mostly started moving on from the role of Superman and focusing on other things, he happened to make friends with director Christopher McQuarry on the set of Mission Impossible: Fallout. And while this was happening, Dwayne Johnson was championing left and right on social media for DC to finally give him his own solo movie as his dream superhero character, Black Adam. I just think it's funny because why would Dwayne Johnson be so passionate about Black Adam? Have you ever read any Black Adam stuff? I mean, it's fine, but it's nobody's dream character. But nonetheless, he had been wanting to play this character for nearly a decade, and when his star power finally got to the point where he could get financing for the movie on his own, he really only had one demand, and that was that Henry Cavill would appear in a post-credit scene to set up a Superman versus Black Adam movie. Another crossover movie? Well, yes, but the hype of that post-credit scene was enough for DC to have Henry Cavill announce that he was coming back to play Superman in a proper Man of Steel sequel for about 10 minutes.
I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman. And the image you see on this post and what you saw in Black Adam are just a very small taste of things to come.
But in that 10 minutes, there was a plan, and in fact, behind the scenes for years, there had been wheels in motion to get a sequel made. Chris McQuarrie's pitch included Superman potentially taking on a member of the Green Lantern Corps. He felt that their conflicts could be similar. But the studio was pushing for the inclusion of fan-favorite villain Brainiac, as well as tie-ins to some of the escaped Kryptonians from the first movie. McQuarrie agreed, wrote the screenplay, and the studio agreed to make it. And according to Christopher McQuarrie, the movie would have been, quote, so fucking good. And he went on to say that the opening sequence of the film would have been a huge crowd pleaser in a very big way, continuing to say,
the first 5 minutes of the movie was a setup after which you knew exactly what made Superman tick, and exactly what Superman was most afraid of, and why Superman made the choices that he made. And it would have been epic. It would have been epic. In 5 minutes, the scale of the movie would have been absolutely extraordinary.
This man is not our enemy.
Now, it's safe to assume that McQuarrie's film would have loosely followed the continuity, or whatever scraps of it were left, of the first phase of the DCEU. And I admit that would have been a challenging way to get us reinvigorated and re-excited for Superman, but at the same time, Superman is so ingrained in the world before, you can't really not acknowledge that stuff. However, the constant stream of critical and financial bombs at the box office from DC led to the movie staying on ice long enough for it to just freeze over. And with that, it was determined that the book was closing on Henry Cavill as the Man of Steel. Shortly after that, it was announced that James Gunn and Peter Safran were taking ownership of DC Studios, and they were going to be putting together a brand new cinematic universe completely separate from any previous continuity. Sort of. The continuity at DC, man. It's a web that cannot be untangled. But hey, at least we did get to see what Henry Cavill might look like if he played Wolverine in the MCU. And for those of us that truly appreciate Cavill as Superman, at least we have that. And I think Deadpool said it better than any of us could have.
We will treat you so much better than those shit fucks down the street.
You were just leaving.
But James Gunn's Superman is coming out soon, and I'm gonna go see it. I hope I enjoy it, and I hope that it does something for the DCU that we've never seen before. But obviously I can't look at the Henry Cavill version of Superman and not wish that we just had one more movie. So what's next for the Man of Steel? We don't know, but it doesn't involve Henry Cavill, and that kind of sucks. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about the potential sequel for Man of Steel, and of course, for you Restore the Snyderverse fans out there, spam away. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
The time is now.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.